Paranoid, isolated from everyone, now devoid of a real sense of proportions and the reality that surrounds him. There are those who have also defined him as wounded in pride, or a victim of Parkinson's disease or some other pathology. Certainly Adolf Hitler, in his last days of life, the last 10 days spent in the Führerbunker, dug under the courtyard of the Reich Chancellery, spent them in anguish, prey to sudden outbursts that froze the blood of his collaborators, his generals, the secretaries, the staff of the entire bunker, but also moments of unthinkable tenderness with Eva Braun, and not only. This is the story of the last 10 days of the man who thought he could dominate the world and who instead wanted to bury the world, his world, along with himself in lucid madness of the
proportions and reality that surrounds him.
There are those who have also defined him as wounded in pride or a victim of Parkinson's disease or some other pathology.
Adolf Hitler enters the Führerbunker in Berlin on January 16, 1945. The war is still largely underway, but it is now clear to everyone that Germany is destined to lose. Moreover, in the east, the Red Army has broken through the lines, has occupied almost all of Poland, and is preparing to cross the German borders of 1939. And they are at the gates of Kustrin and Cottbus, the Soviet armies. Therefore, precisely the border cities with the old Poland that no longer existed for several years. In the west, the push of the Ardennes offensive, the last tail blow at least on the Western Front, has run out exhausted due to lack of fuel, lack of means, and due to the reaction. Here come the English, the French, the Canadians. From the south on the Italian front, the German armies are in continuous retreat and are preparing to return north, pressed both by the partisans and by the Allied armies. In short, Germany is retreating practically on all fronts. It even struggles to hold the original borders of the Reich, maintaining relatively quiet control zones only in Norway and Denmark, occupied in 1940. However, Hitler is still convinced of winning, and from various sides the suspicion begins to creep that he is ultimately a victim of his own madness, a megalomaniac madness that was to lead Germany to be the dominator of the world, of the entire planet Earth, with points with which Hitler for years shared the ideas of restructuring Berlin itself as the world capital of the Reich. But it's a dream that is breaking, only Hitler is not noticing it, locked in his madness. It's a madness that leads him over the weeks to post on paper armed divisions that no longer exist, or rather, they exist on paper, but in reality, those military units have been reduced to very little or have already been swept away or have surrendered to the Soviets or the Allies, who are advancing at an ever-increasing speed. However, Hitler is convinced that something will happen, that a miracle will save the Reich, that there will be a way to overturn the course of the war. A war that until just over 2 years earlier, the Axis seemed capable of winning, at least until the reversal at Stalingrad. At the end of January 1943, the reversal at El Alamein at the beginning of November 1942. In short, those turning points of the conflict that had clearly tipped the balance in favor of the Allied forces and against the 1,000-year Reich. From January 16, 1945, Hitler is locked in the bunker. A somewhat heavy joke is circulating among the high-ranking officers of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht during that period. It was said that Hitler had moved to Berlin because, after all, with the enemies advancing rapidly, it would have been more convenient to move the troops with the Berlin subway rather than with much more expensive means. This joke that makes no one laugh but elicits a few bitter smiles.
After all,
It's not that far from the truth. Then they throw other bridges built by the engineers always on the Rhine to ferry their troops across, and they begin to spread. They spread a bit everywhere. In Bavaria, in Saxony, and Hesse. On the right, the Red Army is pressing harder and harder. In March, the last offensive of the Wehrmacht also fails, Operation Sunflowers, which was supposed to allow the Wehrmacht to regain control of the Hungarian oil wells near Lake Balaton. No use. Even in that case, nothing was done, and without oil, without gasoline, the panzers are stationary. Hitler, for some weeks now, has called to arms both the over-60s framed in the Volkssturm, the territorial militia, and the very young, the boys of the Hitlerjugend, the Hitler Youth, kids, teenagers who are dressed in a uniform. They are handed a Schmeisser or a Panzerfaust, and they are ordered to fight the Soviets just like death. Because beyond all that is rhetoric, behind the squads of the Volkssturm or the Hitlerjugend, the Waffen-SS still swarm, who capture those reluctant to enlist, summarily judge any deserters, and hang them on lampposts with signs. Signs that are eloquent. I am a traitor to the homeland. I refuse to fight. Or they hang mothers who try to hide their sons from conscription. In that case, the sign is even more outrageous. I hid my children from the duty of the homeland. This is what is read on the signs hung around the necks of women who are hanged from lampposts. It's absolute barbarism. After all, Hitler has already understood that he wants nothing behind him. Perhaps he is lucid in his madness, or perhaps he has completely gone mad, but he has learned a lesson from Russia. He wants to destroy everything, leaving nothing behind, especially the factories, in a scorched earth approach. It's one of the first orders he gives to destroy. Albert Speer has a precise order to destroy everything that blows up. Nothing must fall into the hands of either the Allies or even less the Soviets, who are even more feared. In reality, Speer will try to save what can be saved while also avoiding being arrested and ending up on the gallows or shot. On April 20th, 1945, Hitler celebrates his last birthday in the Führerbunker. With him are some other officers. There's Eva Braun,
his lover
and companion, who in a few days will become his wife for a few hours. There's the Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels. He's there with his wife and children. Everyone is there. Actually, no, not everyone is there. Two key figures of the Reich are missing. One is Hermann Göring, the Marshal of the Reich, the creator of the Luftwaffe, the former war hero aviator of the Great War, who preferred, before Berlin was surrounded by the Soviets, to flee south to Berchtesgaden, always considered an impregnable fortress, or at least a quieter location, further away from the clamor of war. The other big absentee, somewhat surprisingly,
is Heinrich
Himmler, the Reichsführer of the SS, the black eminence of the regime. Himmler in those days is between Hamburg and Lübeck. He has ongoing diplomatic missions, but we will talk about this shortly. Göring, in the meantime, from Berchtesgaden, begins to outline the future. He has long understood that Hitler wants to die, and die there in Berlin. He does not want to be taken prisoner. And so Göring, who for several years now is Hitler's dolphin after he escaped, flew to Scotland and was captured by the Allies. Göring knows he is Hitler's legitimate successor in any case. And so on April 22nd, he sends a telegram to the Führerbunker, a telegram written in decidedly conciliatory diplomatic tones, in which Göring asks Hitler to confirm that he is authorized to succeed him as president and chancellor of the Reich. Especially if the situation should deteriorate, things should go wrong, in short, if Hitler should die. Not only that, Göring adds that if he does not receive any communication by 10 p.m. the next day, he will assume that he can take the reins of the Reich by a kind of tacit consent. What Göring cannot know is that in addition to Raditer's outbursts, there is a somewhat malevolent prompter in the dictator's ear. It's Martin Bortmann, the president of the party and the chancellery, who has always been his political adversary. When that telegram arrives, Bormann whispers in Hitler's ear, whispers that Göring is a traitor. Göring is trying to take Hitler's place even before Hitler has done anything or is dead. He is a traitor and therefore he must be arrested and shot. Here occurs the first major outburst of Hitler, a half-hour-long outburst of anger, with screams that can be heard in all the rooms of the Führerbunker. You issued an order that immediately reaches the SS detachment in Berchtesgaden to arrest the Reich Marshal, keep him in custody, and subsequently send him to Berlin for a trial that should end with a death sentence. Göring is indeed arrested, but the SS keep him in custody, not knowing how to move from Berchtesgaden, and after a few days at the news of Hitler's death, they will release him. The next day, April 23rd, another blow. This time, it's Himmler's turn. In fact, as mentioned, Himmler had an appointment in Lübeck. With whom? With a representative of the World Jewish Congress and with the Swedish Count Folke Bernadotte. Both are trying to negotiate with Himmler the release of the concentration camp prisoners. It's a humanitarian gesture. Both are asking Himmler to intervene with the SS so that the massacres end immediately and all prisoners are taken to safety in Switzerland or Sweden in the neutral nations. Himmler seems to be buying time. He declares himself available, agrees, but still asks for a couple of days to be able to organize everything, and also plays dirty because in reality Himmler knows very well that the camps cannot be liberated. He himself for a couple of weeks now has ordered the death marches, those long marches in the forests, some still covered with snow, of the camp survivors, without water, without food, closely watched by the guards with the Totenkopf for bands on their caps, towards new destinations. These are marches that few survive. Himmler, therefore, promises something he cannot keep, but he has miscalculated because the news of his talks with Count Bernadotte reaches the Allies who communicate the news of these negotiations. When Hitler finds out, another fit of rage, screams, and now even the faithful Heinrich, referring precisely to the fact that Göring's betrayal was not enough, even Himmler had turned his back on him. The same treatment for Himmler, an immediate arrest, is ordered, but it is not carried out because, after all, Germany is in total chaos. There is no possibility
to send
a military police squad to stop him and take him to Berlin. Berlin, by the way, is now isolated. Even the starters can no longer land. Even Anna Reich, the heroine of German aviation, can no longer perform miracles. So much so that the last landing in Berlin results in the plane being smashed and several people on board being injured. Berlin is isolated, Göring is ousted, Himmler is ousted, Hitler is left alone with Bormann and Goebbels. They are his last trusted collaborators. There would actually be a third one, who is not exactly a collaborator, but who is almost part of Hitler's family. His name is Hermann Fegelein. He is an officer of the Waffen-SS. He commanded the SS Cavalry Brigade in Russia, later transformed into the 8th Florian Gaia Cavalry Division, a unit that committed atrocities in Belarus and Ukraine in the Pripyat area, where today there is the Cherlovy power plant, and where Fegelein's men massacred almost 7,000 people, mostly civilians, accused of helping the partisans. Fegelein married almost a year earlier with Gretel Braun. She is the sister of Eva Braun, Hitler's mistress. A marriage that between Hermann Fegelein and Gretel Braun, we could say it was pharaonic, held at the end of June 1944 with great celebrations, great gifts, a honeymoon that lasts 2 weeks. In short, something that almost seems cacophonous in the face of an atmosphere of constraint like that of war. Fegelein, among other things, was also wounded at the Wolfschanze during the assassination attempt by Count von Stauffenberg against Hitler, but he recovered from his injuries, and he was sent to Berlin as a military expert. He's not the only general present. He's not even the only SS general, as the defense of Berlin is entrusted to Brigade Führerbunker, who commands what remains of the territorial defense. But Fegelein has no intention of dying in Hitler's madness. Fegelein has other plans. He doesn't even intend to follow Gretel Braun, who has taken refuge in the bunker with her sister. On April 27, 1945, while the battle is already raging, in the suburbs of Berlin, Hermann Feigling is in his apartment in Charlottenburg, a western suburb. The apartment, ironically, is located on a street called Bleibtreuststrasse, the Street of Loyalty. And it's there that the SS militiamen find him in the company of an attractive Hungarian dancer while he's packing to escape to the west. Those militiamen were sent personally by Adolf Hitler, who after Himmler's betrayal no longer trusts anyone, not even Feigling, who had become Himmler's closest collaborator. Hitler has noticed that someone is missing from the roll call Feigling. He orders that he be brought back. Feigling is brought to the bunker, demoted, stripped of all titles, locked in a cell, and after 24 hours, taken to the courtyard of the Chancellery and shot despite both Gretel Braun and his sister Eva trying in every way to intercede for him. Gretel is pregnant and will give birth in early May 1945, among other events. No use, Hitler is unyielding. Every traitor must be shot. The last bad news comes shortly after. It comes from Italy, where the uprising of the National Liberation Committee of Upper Italy on April 25th has sparked a general revolt that has made both the German armies and the fascist supporters flee. Also on the run was Benito Mussolini, Mussolini the traitor to the Italians, Mussolini the old friend to Hitler. Well, Mussolini has been captured. He has been shot along with his lover, Claretta Petacci, and along with the bodies of other hierarchs captured in flight. His corpse has been hung from the roof of a gas station in Piazzale Loreto in Milan, exposed to the anger of the crowd that throws everything at him. Well, Hitler does not want his corpse to end up like that after he dies. Mussolini's end horrifies him with the terror that the Soviet soldiers, who are now less than a kilometer from the Chancellery, might do the same with his body. And so he plans his end. The end of a lone man, a desperate man, a man who, in his last hours of life, decides to fulfill Eva Braun's dream of love, that woman who had been by his side for so many years, since his beloved niece Gelly had killed herself in an apartment in Munich many years before during the political struggle to conquer Germany. Hitler marries Eva Braun, and then, from the last instructions, Eva will ingest poison, he will shoot himself with a revolver, and their bodies must be cremated. The guards of the Führerbunker are ordered to take gasoline from the vehicles parked in the underground garage of the Führerbunker. With that gasoline, they must douse the bodies and set them on fire. Woe if any identifiable human remains fall into the hands of the Soviets. And that's what happens. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler signs his last official act. He appoints Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the father of the submarine fleet, as his successor. He marries Eva Braun in the bunker. Among the wedding witnesses is General Bergdorf. He was the officer who, less than a year earlier, had brought the vial of poison to Erwin Rommel, forcing him to kill himself after the assassination attempt at the Wolfschanze on July 20th, 44. After the ceremonial announcement, Hitler greets his collaborators, his secretaries, the staff, the remaining soldiers, and locks himself in a room, without shouting this time. His last words are, "Please don't make noise, I'm tired and I need to rest." Shortly thereafter, Eva Braun takes the poison, and then a gunshot is heard. The dictator's life ends like this, in a, we would say, inglorious, lonely, or almost with the only comfort of the only woman who had managed to love him, despite all his contradictions. In another room of the Führerbunker, Joseph Goebbels decides to imitate his leader. He has his wife kill all their children, and then he and his wife kill themselves. Nothing must survive. Martin Bormann, as we have already seen in another video, attempted to escape, but it did not go well for him. He likely died, leaving for many years big doubts, in the explosion of a tank near the Chancellery in the midst of the Battle of Berlin. The secretaries, who rely on the Führer Brigade Mönche and his detachment of soldiers to get out of the Chancellery and look for a way out, survive. The soldiers will be disarmed and captured by the Soviets. The secretaries also captured, but after a while, they will be released. The Reich government is now led by Grand Admiral Dönitz. He is the one to manage the last desperate 8 days of what was supposed to be the Reich of 1,000 years, and instead lasted much, much, much less, but with a very long trail of blood. On May 8th, 1945, Field Marshal Keitel, General Judel, Grand Admiral Dönitz, and other officers signed the unconditional surrender in Flensburg. The Nazi nightmare on Europe ends. A long season of hunting for those responsible for everything that had happened, for war crimes, crimes against humanity begins, and then another long season will open, the season of the Cold War. But that's another story.